Welcome to Brat University, a place where we talk about ethical bratting and kink 101 topics. But like any good university, there are some rules that need to be followed while you are here. This is an 18 plus podcast, so if you are under the age of 18, we ask that you stop listening now and come back when you are of age. Second, any of the knowledge in this podcast is based upon the knowledge, experience, and opinions of those who appear on the podcast. Please make sure that you are doing your own research following the listening of this podcast. And last rule, make sure to have fun and enjoy.
Break a heart like an eggshell, cardiac arrest or heart attack. Throw a tantrum, baby doll me up cause I'm a brat. I'm a handful, demi devil pyromaniac. Bitch I am one, throw a tantrum.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Brat University. I am so sorry we have been gone a while, but given that there are a few updates made to the university, sadly our two professors, Havoc and Tatiana, had to step away and step down. So for right now, it will just be me and also, my name has changed as my role in the community has changed, and so now instead of going by Brat-tastic, you will now hear me referred to as Swicked Witch, or Swicked for short. Now, this does not mean that we are no longer doing Brat content or Brat education, but just myself, I no longer solely identify as a brat. I have recently embraced my role as a switch, and I am loving every bit of it, and so I wanted a name that better reflected that. So with that being said, let's dive right into today's episode, and I wanted to start because a few months ago, I did an interview with the lovely ladies over at Elevate and Dominate podcast, and they sent me over a series of questions that could be answered on the podcast. Now, a big thing I noticed with their questions, and I swear this is no hate to them, when they were asking me questions, they were asking, how does a submissive or brat do this? And I noticed that they continually separated the term submissive and brat. And as we have talked about before on this show, brats are submissives, at least in the context that we're talking about. We have a whole episode talking about that you can be a brat in other roles, but the term submissive and brat are not separate terms. A brat is a submissive. It is a subset of types of submissives, just like there are service subs, there are littles, there are pets, there are slaves. Just like those terms are technically all submissives, but they're different types of submissives, brats are as well. And I know that there is a huge rap that brats get, that they're not real submissives, and we already talked about that they top from the bottom or anything like that. So I just wanted everyone on this podcast to know, and hopefully to clear up some education even for these two wonderful ladies, that brats are submissives. There is no need to separate those two terms. So with that, we're going to pick one of their questions, and we're going to use this episode to answer these questions. So one of them is about how to communicate boundaries to, how can a submissive communicate their boundaries to their dominant partner? So first off, if you're wanting to just let your boundaries be known, this is something you might want to do in the vetting process before you even get into that power exchange. You want to, as much as you can, because we don't always know everything about ourselves, so things will come up, but while you're vetting, you're going to want to let somebody know what your triggers are, what your limits are, and you can do that in a respectful manner by just simply stating, hey, these are what my limits are you okay with these? And if they're not, then they're not the partner made for you. And if they're good with it, then move forward. So always, as much as you can, try to state your boundaries before even diving into a full-fledged dynamic. Now, let's say you are in a dynamic and you're submissive and you don't want to say your boundary in a way that's going to, disregard that dynamic. You kind of want to put your role into stating your boundaries to your dominant partner. Um, you can ask for certain things if it is pre-negotiated that, by you asking, this is you kind of stating where your boundary is. So, for example, when I was planning a scene with my dom that I would say, can we, not do XYZ this time? Can we only focus on this? And while I might have been asking, I knew out the gate that he knew that I was saying, hey, I don't want to do these things. But by asking permission, it technically kept the power exchange still in play. But honestly, a lot of with boundary setting, you are a person and you are allowed to state your boundaries to another person, whether they be your dominant or not. And you should feel free to be able to set those boundaries. Let's say you were doing a scene and realized that something came up that you're like, hey, I don't want to do this again. I don't want this to be a part of, our dynamic anymore. And you should feel free to say that. Anytime I had that type of discussion, I would simply tell my dominant, hey, I'd like to talk to you about something, and just sit down and have a conversation. I would say, I don't want to say don't be demanding, because you are allowed to be firm with your boundaries, but don't go to, your partner, in this case we're talking about your dominant, don't go to them and say, well, you can't do this, and this, and be kind of like mean about it and kind of throw it at them. Phrase it like I've been told so many times in therapy, phrase it in terms of I statements, where I do not want to do this. I do not feel comfortable doing this. So you're framing it in a way that it puts it back on you and not so much onto the dominant partner. But communicating your boundaries should always be something you feel free to do. And if you do not feel safe and free to do so, I would say definitely look into your dynamic and figure out why do you not have that trusting and open dynamic with your partner. Let's see, another question that they asked, one that we already covered, the difference between a submissive and a brat. There isn't a difference. Brats are submissives. And then they wanted to know some of the misconceptions about brats and the lifestyle, and we have a few episodes that go over that already. So this next question actually kind of ties into the boundaries question. They said, what are some effective ways for a submissive to express their desires to their dominant? Once again, ask for it in a sexy, seductive way. I had to learn that with my dominant, because I would just tell them, I need a spanking, or I need this, I need that. And it never felt like, my partner told me it didn't feel like they were the ones in control, that I was expressing a need and that they had to fulfill it, and that I essentially was taking the control by what was being given and received and things of that nature. So you could ask politely, and let's say you were going to go talk to your dominant, and you could say, my ass could really use a spanking, or you could say, would you please spank me, or, asking for it in a way. I do know that some people, they would keep a log, like a journal, and on one page, that they would put down some things that they would like to happen, and it was up to the dominant to go and, regularly check in with this journal, and then they would work that into a scene somewhere in the near future, not always right away, especially if you have put down a long list of what your desires are. And in that way, it put the control back in the dominant's hands of, well, I know what they want, but they can kind of mold it into a scene where that's included, but they're not simply just doing it because you told them to. So if you have something that you would like, I find that asking rather than demanding tends to go better with your if you're asking something of a uh, dominant partner. And so those are ways, or maybe you have a different dynamic with your dominant partner and you can um, actually just sit down with your dominant and say, hey, I would like this, 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 and this. It really is dependent on what kind of relationship you have with your dominant partner. So from a bratty perspective of, communicating boundaries or expressing desires, I know me personally, when it comes to expressing desires, I kind of get in a more, I wouldn't say pouty, but, if I wanted a spanking and I hadn't gotten one for a while, I'd just be like, I guess that, it's just too much for you to handle, that you can't do that. Now that worked with my dominant. You have to figure out what works with yours and what kind of bratty behavior you could use in those moments. Some dominants don't want you to say that, apparently that you're too much for them, or saying anything about them being inadequate. That could be too much, but that was something that worked for me. Honestly, sometimes I don't even say anything when expressing my desires. Like, let's say I really want to fuck. Like, I might just lay in bed, all naked and in a sultry way that will express what I would like without having to say anything. Like, and I keep going back to spanking because that's the easiest way to give examples, but with me wanting that, I might just, lean over. I did something where, I brought out a paddle and I leaned over the end of the bed. And so when my dom came in the room, he clearly saw what I wanted. So sometimes not saying anything can go very well. But it really, once again, depends on the communication you have with you and your dominant. All partners or all relationships are different. Everyone's going to do things differently. But I think those two questions are very well matched together, expressing your boundaries and expressing your desires, because I know that I struggled with that and how to ask for something without breaking that power exchange and making it feel like I was demanding something. Sometimes it helps if you have like a kink that you would regularly like to engage in, setting up some sort of schedule, or just kind of saying, hey, I would like this to happen this many times over this period of time. And sometimes that can work for different dynamics and things of that nature. So I know today was a short class, but we are going to cut it here. I know that bell's going to be ringing here soon, and I hope you enjoyed the short little tidbit where, stepping back into the water, refiguring out how our format's going to work now that things are a little bit different. But I hope you look forward to more episodes in the future. I'm going to be hopping back into this, and even if I have to do it just me here by myself, hopefully I can bring in some guests to do these with me occasionally. But like I said, I hope you enjoyed today's class, and until next time, I am Swicked Witch, and thank you for coming. Did you like what you heard? Then make sure to never miss a class. You can find us on one of your favorite podcatchers, which include Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, and Good Pods. You can also find us on Twitter and TikTok at Brat University. Make sure to look in the show notes below to join our Discord server. We can't wait to hear from you.
She's on your nice